Socrates once said that man must rise above the earth to truly understand the world he lives in. And what better way to do that than from the comfy window seat of a Boeing 747? Ha ha! But once in a while, folks flying up high in airplanes spot a thing or two that mankind, or at least airline customer kind, were never meant to lay their eyes on. From sky-high shapeshifters to terrifying military interceptions, buckle up as we fly through some of the craziest things flight passengers were never supposed to see. Part 2. Runway run-ins. While you might think that the safest part of airplane travel is while you're grounded on the runway, think again. Passengers on this grounded plane at Barcelona Airport experienced quite the close call when they saw another plane speeding right towards them while coming into land. It turned out, due to a miscommunication, the flying plane had been cleared to land while the grounded plane had also been given clearance to cross the runway. While the quick thinking of the flying pilot is to be commended, pilots are specially trained to deal with such situations. If runway conditions aren't satisfactory for a plane to make a safe landing, pilots need to perform a safety maneuver called a go-around, which was exactly the case in the clip we just saw. Fortunately, this particular incident happened on a clear morning and the plane on the runway was seen in time, but if things had been a little foggier, well, it doesn't bear thinking about. A similar event took place in February 2023 when air traffic control double-booked a runway at Austin, Texas International Airport. Check out the jaw-dropping flight path shown on this digital radar tracker. The near miss happened at around 6:40 a.m. when a Southwest Airlines flight was cleared to depart just before a FedEx cargo plane was expected to land on the very same runway. Like the close call at Barcelona Airport, the FedEx pilot was able to perform a go-around and avoid any disasters. While not caught on camera, it looks equally scary to see just how close the two planes were from the flight data, though thankfully their altitude difference was plenty enough to keep passengers safe. Still, I think I'm ready to perform my very own go-around on this stressful story. Tricky takeoffs. While a near miss on the ground is scary enough, what about one at 35,000 feet? In February 2019, a passenger on board an Aer Lingus flight captured another plane zooming alongside theirs while en route from Dublin, Ireland to Lisbon, Portugal. While it's not immediately clear exactly how far away this other plane is, there are airspace rules on how close flying aircraft can be. For commercial airliners flying below 29,000 feet, planes must maintain a distance of at least 3 miles horizontally, which extends to 5 miles if flying any higher. These rules are strictly enforced, and considering these planes are typically around 150 feet long, it's fair to assume it looks closer than it really is. Although some might argue that rules were made to be broken, I'd say the passenger that captured this next near miss may beg to differ.
We're supposed to be on 2,000 feet. Oh, 254 Kilo Orlando approach, Roger, and what heading did they give you?
090, we saw it, we saw the guy coming. So we just flew 150 now, but they gave us 090 up to 2,000.
While flying above Orlando Airport in Florida, a small Cessna 172 came within about 500 feet of a civilian-filled Delta flight during takeoff. Pilot Malik Clark had been following instructions from air traffic control, who told him to direct his Cessna east over the airport. But things quickly went from plain sailing to a plane nightmare when he and his passengers spotted a Boeing 757 heading straight across their path. Thanks to Malik's quick thinking, he quickly diverted as fast as he could, enacting an emergency maneuver to prevent a mid-air collision. The incident was put down to a mistake made by air traffic controllers who'd given the go-ahead for both planes to cross over the very same flight path. Yikes, I wouldn't want to be the employee called in for that meeting. Intercepted. Usually the worst thing you'll run into on an airplane is a bit of pesky turbulence. But for passengers on British Airways Flight 108 from Dubai to London in April 2016, there was a different kind of Air Force on their tail. To the shock of passengers, they found themselves intercepted by a Gripen fighter jet while passing through Hungarian airspace. But how did this happen? And what happened next? Well, this very second, there's more than 7,000 commercial flights in the air, and air traffic control stations across the globe are monitoring their every move. Aircrafts are monitored using an onboard electronic communication device called a transponder, which sends real-time signals to air traffic control about the plane's flight number, altitude, speed, and destination. If the transponder fails for any reason, air traffic controllers would see this as a major safety red flag. If all other attempts at communicating with the pilot also fails, they can get in touch with the military, who will quickly send in fighters to communicate with the plane air-to-air. In the case of British Airways Flight 108, the military intervention was prompted when the plane entered Hungarian airspace unannounced without contacting air traffic control. Thankfully, communication, which had seemingly dropped due to a technical error, was quickly restored and the flight landed safely at its destination. While I'm all for kicking back to an in-flight action movie, I'd rather not witness a live showing of Top Gun from my window seat. Black hole. While taking in the view from an airplane window can feel like looking into heaven's light, our next flight passenger encounter was more like being faced with the abyss. This may look like a black hole that's made its way into our skies from outer space, but this terrifying phenomenon is very much of this Earth. This apocalyptic-looking swirl was spotted by flight passengers flying over East Palestine, Ohio, after a train transporting hazardous materials derailed in February 2023. The train included 20 carriages filled with highly toxic chemicals which spilled into the environment. While the initial derailment happened on February 3rd, this smoke monster is reported to have come from a controlled burn below a few days later on February 6th. The burn was intended to prevent explosions from the chemical contents of several of the carriages, though it was criticized for releasing noxious fumes into the surrounding air. While the sight of this dark plume is no doubt a terrifying view from the sky, it's even scarier to know what's going on just below. Sky-high shapeshifter. What would you do if you were just chilling in your airplane seat, glanced out the window, and saw this? This mysterious footage emerged in July 2021 and is reported to show a flying shapeshifter shot from the window of a commercial flight by an anonymous passenger. The anonymous passenger claimed that the ominous shapeshifting object flew alongside the aircraft for a whole 7 minutes. If true, that would mean the UFO had to be flying at around 550 miles per hour to keep up with the plane's cruising speed. It's pretty weird to say the least. Based on the incredibly shaky camera work, it looks as though the UFO was shot zoomed in from a distance, but some online sleuths have offered theories that might bring things a little closer to home. Some have pointed out that the creepy footage could potentially be a zoomed-in shot of a water droplet or a small crack on the outside of the window, which would explain its shape-shifting powers, changing appearance as the angle of the camera changes. Others have theorized the UFO could be a deflated high-altitude weather balloon, and there's no denying that there's a striking resemblance. But what do you think? Let me know your best theories in the comments below. Spy balloons. While the question of whether alien shapeshifters are trying to spy on us isn't one we have time to answer today, there are some very real cases of flying spies in the skies. In early 2023, a U.S. pilot captured what he suspected to be a surveillance balloon carrying a satellite over the state of Montana. The balloon was first spotted on January 28th after it had already flown over a number of sensitive military bases and was eventually shot down on February 4th off the coast of South Carolina. Spy balloons like these come kitted out with sensors and cameras that are used to monitor or gather intelligence with the ability to hover as high as 120,000 feet in the air. In this case, U.S. officials believe the flying object to be a Chinese spy balloon, which is reported to have transmitted real-time information to Beijing about U.S. communication systems. While it's unlikely a passenger plane, which will typically cruise at around 35,000 feet, would come face-to-face with high-altitude balloons like this one, it's definitely scary to consider that while flying in a plane may make you feel like you're on top of the world, you really never know what intrusive technology could be floating higher above. Red Sky Frights. If you're a window seat lover, then you'll know that the sky can offer a whole host of breathtaking and beautiful colors. But in July 2022, the folks aboard one plane found themselves faced with what appeared to be blazing portals of fire in the clouds. These eerie orbs might look like nightmarish portals to the upside down, but before we get 11 and the gang involved, let's consider some more likely explanation with the clues we've got. While the pilot who took these pictures has remained anonymous, we do know that they were shot somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean. But that only creates more questions. What could possibly be emitting this kind of light from the middle of the ocean? The most likely explanation is that the lights are coming from a very large fishing vessel emitting bright red lights to attract a type of bait fish called Sauri. Sauri fish are highly attracted to bright red lights, and so the fishing vessels used to catch them are decked out with hundreds of massive LEDs, which draw in the fish like moths to a flame. Similar phenomena have been spotted in the past, both by flight passengers and even the International Space Station, which snapped hundreds of fishing boats using green lights thought to help with catching squid. While the lights appear to be more aquatic than alien, this red sky at night might be a fisherman's delight, but the worst nightmare of a plane passenger with no clue of the explanation. Parallel planes. So far, we've seen passengers spotting some truly unexpected anomalies from the windows of their flights in the air, but our next window watchers found out that even landing can come with its surprises. This footage was captured by a passenger coming in to land at San Francisco International Airport in June 2016, when not one, but two civilian planes dropped in for landing at exactly the same time. While you might associate this kind of close flying stunt with the likes seen in Daredevil air shows, this close encounter is very much of the safe kind. At San Francisco International, runways 28 left and 28 right are separated by just 750 feet. Which is right at the borderline of the minimum legal distance of 700 feet. This means that landing sometimes has to be a highly coordinated process. When two planes approach the parallel runways at San Francisco Airport, they must both fly in at an angle to keep a safe distance from one another. As the planes get closer to the runways, the pilots must confirm to air traffic control that they each have a clear view of the other plane as they come in to land safely. Some airports like Sydney even have opposite parallel runways, with one used for takeoff and one used for landing. This means that planes can cross over closely in the sky as one descends while the other rises, and from the right force perspective, it's hard to believe the maneuver could possibly be safe. Honestly though, as safe as this really is, remind me to strike Sydney and San Francisco off my travel bucket list. Window woes. While we can all agree that airplane flight is one of the best and fastest ways to see the world, there's still one debate flight passengers the world over can't quite agree on. What's better, the aisle or window seat? Well, that question was quickly answered in the negative for one window seat passenger on board a Southwest Airlines flight from Arizona to Las Vegas. Check this out. While the mere idea of an airplane window breaking at 30,000 feet is beyond terrifying, it turns out that it's not always as dangerous as it may appear. Since the air pressure outside an airplane at cruising altitude is much lower than the pressure inside, aircraft windows are under considerable stress. To deal with this, most windows on modern airplanes are split into 3 separate layers, and while all 3 are most certainly important, it's the outer and middle planes that do most of the heavy lifting. The inner layer that you lean your head against or press your phone up to is called the scratch pane, and it's actually not integral to the structure or safety of the window itself. It just prevents you from touching the parts that matter. While it's unclear how the scratch plane we just saw got broken, it was ultimately a case of no real harm done. That said, the disturbed passenger did walk away with a $300 flight voucher, though I'm not sure how quickly I'd be cashing in on another flight after that kind of ordeal. From air to orbit. For most of us, flying in an airplane is the closest we'll ever get to outer space. But for one group of unsuspecting flight passengers flying from JFK, New York to Cancun, Mexico in May 2021, things were about to feel a whole lot closer.
Oh my God.
On May 18th at exactly 1:37 p.m. when passing over Cape Canaveral Space Station, this window seat Delta passenger caught the launch of one of the USA's Atlas V rockets. The rocket in question was launching a missile warning satellite, a service that can spot the launch of a ballistic missile and immediately relay that information to the ground. While no doubt a once-in-a-lifetime kind of sight for the average flight passenger, you might be wondering how exactly it's safe for a civilian plane to fly this close to a launching rocket. Usually when a launch takes place, air traffic control will put restrictions on the airspace around the rocket's intended flight path. Not only that, but spaceports are quite often located close to the ocean so that rockets can launch over the water instead of civilian-heavy areas. In the case of this Atlas V launch, the no-fly restriction around Cape Canaveral would have extended around 30 miles out to sea, the direction in which the rocket was heading, meaning that these Delta passengers were quite safe in their front row seats flying above the land. Engine eeks. While watching a fiery rocket from afar is pretty wondrous, this next bout of flames feels far too close for comfort. Take a look. Yeah, that's a nope from me. While en route from Guadalajara, Mexico to Los Angeles in August 2022, passengers on board this Viva Aerobus flight were horrified to spot flames and sparks emitting from one of the plane's whirring engines. The fire was spotted after a loud boom startled passengers 10 minutes into their flight just after the plane reached 13,000 feet. Undoubtedly one of the scariest sights any passenger can see while on a plane, the pilot was luckily able to land the plane after turning the engine off. Which may sound crazy, but most aircraft are designed to be able to depend on the plane's other engines to get them safely to land if one fails. Thankfully, all those on board the Viva Aerobus flight were unharmed, though the flight was postponed for nearly 12 hours. With a new plane, of course. Airplane engine fires aren't the only mechanical failures that can strike fear into passengers' hearts. It's estimated that around 40% of the general population fears some aspect of flying in an airplane, but I'd wager 100% of the population would fear finding themselves on a plane that seems to be falling apart. While taking in views over the Greek islands of Crete, passengers aboard an Air Serbia flight in August 2009 were shocked to find loose screws in their midst. And not just the ones in the back row who'd overindulged on in-flight cocktails. Just above one of the aircraft's engines, passengers spotted a panel with at least 5 loose and even missing screws, leading them to believe things were about to head south. As crazy as it seems, Air Serbia assured passengers that this was no real cause for alarm, as the panel was mainly for aesthetics and was not integral to the safety of the aircraft. Even so, I'm not sure missing something like this during pre-flight checks is going to bag the aircraft safety workers behind this mistake any Employee of the Year awards. But we're just getting started with our wing-related horror show. In August 2016, a Southwest Airlines flight on its way from New Orleans to Orlando was forced to make an emergency landing after one of its engines began to tear apart midair. A loud boom and the smell of smoke was the first sign that something was wrong, but when passengers began spotting parts of the plane's right engine flapping in the wind outside their windows, emergency procedures began. Flying shrapnel even sliced into the tail of the jet and fuselage, which caused the cabin to depressurize. As oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling in the passenger cabin, their quick-thinking pilot hastily diverted the flight to the closest airport in Pensacola, Florida. Later investigations revealed that the cause of the incident was down to metal fatigue around the plane's engines alongside general wear and tear. While it's comforting to know nobody was harmed, the fact that something like this can happen despite regular airplane quality checks is making me think it may just be best to never look out of a plane window, in case you see something like that. Airs of mystery. When Frontier Airlines Flight 2314 took off from Charlotte, North Carolina towards Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in July 2022, everything seemed to have taken off without a hitch. But just after takeoff, something happened that put a bit of a cloud over proceedings. Literally. While scenes of smoke in an airplane cabin may make your stomach drop in fear, these passengers are actually experiencing an unusual treat. That's because what we're looking at here isn't smoke at all, it's mist. Planes taking off from hot and humid climates often experience this unique indoor weather phenomenon when the hot and humid air outside the cabin is rapidly cooled and condensed by the onboard air conditioning unit. This creates waves of water vapor that have the eerie appearance of smoke flowing into the passenger cabin. Most planes have a special device called a water separator to prevent this from happening too often, but it's possible the one on board this Frontier aircraft wasn't working so well on this particular day. So if you so happen to spot a bit of odorless smoke on board your next flight, and the cabin crew and pilots are conducting business as usual, it's all cool. Literally. Identified flying object. UFO sightings seem to be getting more common every year, but how about we take a look at one that can actually be explained? When one flight passenger captured this eerie saucer suspended above the clouds from their airplane window, they weren't sure what to make of it at first. However, this particular plane was actually passing over Seattle, Washington, which offers a big clue as to what we're seeing here. This is actually the top of Seattle's famous Space Needle Observation Tower. The Space Needle is topped with a saucer-shaped observation deck that offers 360-degree views of the city. But it seems that this particular day may not have offered the clearest views. Known as one of the U.S.'s cloudiest cities, Seattle typically sees more than 220 days of heavy cloud per year. Not only that, but the city can be the setting of fog waves as high as 500 to 750 feet, which could explain how the 605-foot Space Needle was able to rise up above the smog. While it would be pretty cool if this was a real-life cloud city, the explanation for this sighting is a lot more down to earth. Smoke monster. Arguably the best part of any flight is staring out at the cloudy dreamland floating by. But while traveling from Las Vegas to Sacramento, California on August 17, 2021, passengers on one Spirit Airlines flight came across some beautiful clouds hiding a sinister secret. This colossal plume might look like a cloudy mountain range in the sky, but it's actually the result of one of nature's harshest disasters. Passengers later found out that the smoke had come from the Calder Fire, a large wildfire burning in eastern California's El Dorado National Forest between August 14th and October 21st, 2021. The Calder Fire burned over 200,000 acres of forest before being contained, and the plume spotted by flight passengers was strangely peaceful compared to what was going on below. Sadly, as we've seen, wildfires can affect the skies as well as the ground below. But our next group of flight passengers saw something stranger than just smoke. Passengers on this flight had an apocalyptic experience when lifting off from San Francisco Airport during the state's unprecedented fire season in August and September 2020. But how did this happen? Well, white sunlight is a combination of all the colors of the rainbow, but when smoke from active wildfires is in the air, sometimes the particles can filter out blue light before it reaches our eyes. With only the longer red and yellow frequencies of light able to pass through, an eerie orange-tinted sky can ensue. Stunning and frightening to behold, this blazing orange sky looks more like the world of Blade Runner 2049. Let's just hope not too many more sights like that are waiting in our future. Gator Gate. One of the best parts of arriving home after a flight can be the moment you're reunited with family and friends waiting at the gate for your return. But there's one airport out there where you might find a slightly snappier welcoming committee. Check this out. Talk about a proper Florida greeting. When a Spirit Airlines flight touched down in Orlando International in June 2018, passengers found the final leg of their journey held up by an alligator out for a stroll across the runway. Florida has an immense 1.3 million alligators, and that population can be spotted all over the state, even at airports. Orlando International Airport sits amongst over 12,000 acres of Florida wetlands, meaning they've had to employ an on-site biologist as well as a wildlife team of staff on hand to help with any potential encounters. While every airport passenger will find themselves proceeding to one of many gates, at Orlando International you might find yourself gatored before you've even gotten to the end of the runway. Plane piggyback. While the idea of a plane landing on top of another sounds utterly catastrophic, passengers in LAX departure lounges were shocked to see what looked to be exactly that in September 2012. In fact, it was even more extreme than that. They saw what looked to be a rocket landing atop a plane. Check it out. Though certainly nerve-wracking to behold, this double air mobile is actually completely safe. This is one of NASA's space shuttle carriers, one of two modified Boeing 747s that have been kitted out to transport space shuttles between different space stations. Introduced in 1981, NASA's Space Shuttle program saw humanity's first reusable spacecrafts in action. But by 2011, the program was deemed too expensive to continue. This particular landing was special for more than just its appearance though, as it was Space Shuttle Endeavour's final flight before being put up for permanent display at the California Science Center. It really makes you think. While we often associate airports with stress and rushing for flights, if you stop to look around, sometimes you'll see history in the making. Have you ever seen anything on a plane that you think you weren't supposed to see? Let me know in the comments down below. Or why not check out part 1 of this series? Either way, see you next time, and thanks for watching.